When you know the correct way to wind a bobbin and thread the machine, your sewing is going to be such a breeze. We're working with the Singer CE677, and if you have another machine that's very similar, a lot of Singers thread and wind bobbins all about the same. We're also going to go over how to use the needle threader and how to properly put the bobbin in and get started to sewing. We've plugged the machine in and plugged the foot control in and turned the machine on. You're going to also want to use good quality sewing thread. So if you have thread that's from like grandma, and those threads have like price tags and stickers on the top that look quite ancient, we'll say vintage, okay? Probably not the best quality of thread to use in your brand new machine. So definitely take some time to invest in some quality thread. Today I'm using a Mettler brand. I know there's a lot of great brands out there, but just work with your local sewing machine store. They're gonna recommend good quality thread. The more you pay for thread, the better quality it is. Trust me. You'll also have a spool cap of a large or small that you'll want to pull out. So if your spool is a little larger like mine, I'm going to be sliding this on the spindle here and then sliding this on. Now here's the next thing. When you push it on, make sure there's no gap left in between there. If you have a spool that's a lot narrower at the end, this small one is great for that. You also find that you have a vertical spool pin, one that will sit right here. You add it on, and there's even a little felt pad that you can put on. Spools that have little X's on their spool, like by the way it's wound on, we call this cross wound thread, that goes on a horizontal spool pin. If your thread doesn't have the X's, more like a straight across, then I would recommend that you put it on the vertical spool pin. So it actually spins off the back of it. So for today, I'm going to just take this off, set it aside, and now we're following the dotted lines for winding the bobbin. I have an empty bobbin close by. We're going to take our spool and catch the first guide. All the guides are nice and open, so all you have to do is slip it in, click it in, and this part is the most important part of winding a bobbin. See how this has a little pre-tensioner? It's kind of got a little spring in there. You're going to wrap the thread clockwise. So I'm going this way and around towards my bobbin winder. This little pre-tensioner is what keeps the thread winding on the bobbin nice and even. If you've ever wound a bobbin that has, and it kind of turns out kind of fluffy, you're going to, that was because the thread wasn't under this little pre-tensioner correctly, and that will make a difference. Our next little dotted line picture here shows the thread being placed from the inside of the bobbin through the hole and up through the top. As you slide it on, push down and push it to the right. Now I'm holding the thread straight up above the bobbin with a couple inches wrapped around my finger here, and I'm not going to let go. As I step on my foot control, I will find that my bobbin will start to wind. And right now, because it's a brand new machine, it is winding very, very slow. That's because it usually came out of the box at the slow speed. So we're going to speed that up. And I can go ahead and stop, take my scissors and trim the thread really close to the bobbin. You don't want any little nub of thread sticking up for when you drop it in and start using it in the machine. So I always say wind a full bobbin and make sure you don't have any extra. You see how it's winding nice and smooth, and that's because it's got hooked around the pre-tensioner just right. When the bobbin gets full, it will start to not spin anymore. So we're just going to wait till that starts to kind of not spin in. There it is. And I'll stop with the foot control. We're going to cut the thread, and we'll slide this back to the left. Now here is a little trick. The way this winds is exactly the direction that if I lift this up and drop it right into the bobbin area, that is the way it needs to go in. Now, if you're just reaching for your bobbin from a pre-organized area where all your bobbins are kept, you are going to want to look. Your picture on the door here shows your thread needs to come off the left side when it's dropped in. So there is a wrong way to put a bobbin in. It makes it so it doesn't stitch great. It's kind of like, it's okay. So do make sure you get in the habit. Take the little button here, slide it to the right. That pops up this little opening. I'm going to take the bobbin out that came with the machine. and I'm dropping that bobbin straight in. You see next those very obvious white arrows. Take your thread and come underneath that black area. And sometimes I like to put my finger on this bobbin so it stops spinning, puts a little resistance, and there's a little click you might hear as you slide your thread underneath this white arrow. Follow the path, and here's a fun little thing. There is a cutter right at the end of this arrow. So as I pull to the right, it cuts the thread and holds the perfect length of tail for when I start to sew. I don't even have to bring up the bobbin thread before I sew. That was something we had to do a long time ago, and on this machine, you don't. Here's that little picture to remind you which way the bobbin needs to go. We'll slide that cover and door back in place. Please note that if you're missing that cover, it is pretty important, and it's really hard to sew with fabric crossing over that area without that cover in place. So just make sure you always put this on after you put your bobbin in. Back up at the top, we are now following, instead of the dotted line path, the solid line path. So undo the pretensioner. This is only used when we're winding the bobbin. Do make sure that your first guide is threaded, and what that is it keeps everything coming off the spool nice and centered, so there's no drag on the spool whatsoever. Come under this first guide here. Now before I go any further, I'm going to show you a little trick. I tend to thread now with my left hand, and that's because at the top I'm holding the thread with a little resistance, so as I thread the next couple paths and openings, the thread gets pushed in deep enough to be properly seated where it needs to go. So here it is, number 3 and 4. And if you do this, if you come up under 4 and do a little kind of floss, you are guaranteed to have a lot more success than if you just gently laid it down this little groove. After that, you can kind of let go. You're coming in on the right and then down on the left of the take-up lever. Now, if this part is not up at the top, turn your hand wheel and bring it all the way up there, or push the needle up-down button to bring it to its proper position. Bring it straight down to 6, and there's a guide right at the bottom of the housing that we're going to go around. It is open on the right side, and there's one guide now at the top of the needle. You'll see that guide is open also on the right side, so push it back behind it. It is a good idea to master your needle threader. We'll also do a separate video on this, so here's how it's going to look. As you pull this down, there's a little hook right here that you're going to set the thread underneath, and as you push the whole needle threader all the way down, there's a small hook that has come from the back of the needle towards us. As we place the thread into the needle threader and lift up, you can let it rotate out of your fingers, and it will pull a small loop to the back that you can then pull through. So if threading a needle is a little harder these days, that is a great feature. Next, take your thread, slide it down the center of the foot, and push it towards the back. When you go to sew, and every time I sew on this machine, you're going to see me taking a piece of fabric and folding it in half. That way, you are always testing your stitch on 2 layers of fabric. Lower the presser foot down. There's a little lever on the inside of the machine, and step on your foot control, and you'll have your first stitch on your new machine. When you're done, you'll notice that the needle always stops in the up position, which is perfect. So you can lift the presser foot up, and there is a small thread cutter on the side of the machine I'm going to use. Pull the fabric out, and you can go from front to back or back to front and pull down, and you don't even need scissors to cut your thread. If you see the same stitch on the front as you do on the back, you have threaded your machine correctly. Now we do have a whole video on troubleshooting, maybe things that are not working, and things that you can fix or double check have to be all correct for a machine to work, such as needles and threading and things about bobbin and tension. All those things will make a difference, and we'll put links to that video here at the end. I hope you'll check out all the videos to help you master your Singer CE677.